Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of The Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. It's a slow week this week. There's not much going on in terms of Utah sports and athletics. I could talk about the Bees, but I don't want to because I don't want to jinx the MLB not coming here. I really want an MLB team to come to Utah so I could be the voice of whatever they're going to be called. So let's make that happen. Let's put that in the universe. But I am going to talk about a couple of things. I will talk about the Jazz and the NBA draft and just everything that's going on there. Spoiler alert, it's all smoke screens. That's all this time of year is. That's it. But I will also be talking about the Utah Mammoth, a lot of the rumors swirling around them and trade possibilities, trade candidates, because quite frankly, the free agent class sucks. It does. It's terrible in the NHL this year. So I'll talk about them. And Real Salt Lake does have one player at the World Cup. I'll talk about who that is and what country he's representing and if he's going to see very much time on the pitch. But it is cool that Real Salt Lake has a player there. And then also ESPN did a college football future power rankings that I found interesting because it's not just the clickbait garbage that they have fallen into the past decade or so. It's actually kind of well thought out and researched. And they do actually reference previous articles or previous things they've written about this sort of article they do. So it is something that I have looked at, read, digested, went back and read again, and was actually impressed with what they did. I know it's very rare for me to say that about an ESPN article, but in this instance, it's true. So thank you all so much for being here. As always, follow me on the socials. That is Facebook and Instagram. You can find me at the Mad Cave Podcast on both. You can also find me on YouTube, the Mad Cave Podcast. I've been debating on if there will be video or not. I'm leaning towards yes. I just don't know how that's going to happen or what I'm going to be doing as far as like recording and all of that other stuff. So stay tuned. But that should be coming eventually. I'm thinking around the start of football season, maybe. But that is on the horizon. And also, please rate and review this podcast 5 stars wherever it is, however you listen, and share it with just one person that you think would enjoy the program. Helps me out a ton. I say it every week. I'm going to continue to say it every week. Please do so. And let's jump into things. Let's start with Real Salt Lake in the World Cup because the World Cup is going on, and as much as I wanted it to fail in the United States, and I'm not going to get political on this show, I just wanted it to, it's been fun to watch. Every single game has been fun to watch, except for Germany-Curacao that just wrapped up. That one was just sad for Curacao. Germany won that one in a rout, 7-1. I mean, Germany made Curacao look like they made Brazil look all those years ago. It was men against boys out there. And that's what happens when you expand the World Cup. I was not a fan of the World Cup getting expanded. I wasn't. Because I loved those group stage matchups where they are barn burners, and the games mean more. There's going to be some third-place finishers in these groups that go through to the knockout stages. And that just changes the tenor of the games. It changes the intensity, and it changes the strategy for the coaching staffs. And I don't like it. I don't. But back to Real Salt Lake and the player that is representing his country from Real Salt Lake. It is Juan Manuel Sanabria. He is a midfielder for Real Salt Lake, and he is a very, very, very good player. He won't be with Real Salt Lake for long. I believe he is slated to leave Real Salt Lake at the end of the World Cup, I think. There's been a lot of rumors about him transferring out and all this other stuff, but that's really cool. Uruguay is in Group F, so they haven't played yet, alongside Spain, Cape Verde, and Saudi Arabia. In that group, I would anticipate Uruguay finishing second behind Spain. So there could be a Real Salt Lake player in the knockout stages. It was a huge disappointment to see Diego Luna not making the team. I understand why Xavier Gozo didn't. He came on really strong late, but he's not there yet. And I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I'm not going to rehash it again. But Diego Luna not making it, that one was a head scratcher for me. Now, I would have taken him above Gio Reyna, but Gio Reyna kind of proved a little bit why I am recording this show and not coaching the U.S. men's national team or selecting the roster. So that's where we're at with that. I don't know if Sanabria is going to be starting any of the matches for Uruguay. He could, because this is not Uruguay's golden generation anymore. This isn't Luis Suarez. It's not Edson Cavani. This is a different group of players. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. So I will be watching Uruguay. I don't think I'll be rooting for them. The teams I'm rooting for, or I guess the nations that I'm rooting for in the World Cup, are obviously the U.S. because I'm an American. But I'm also rooting for teams like Scotland, who haven't been there in forever. I'm rooting for England, for them to win their first World Cup since the 60s. I think that'd be really cool. And it's not just to garner favor with Chris over on Radio Ronan. I actually am rooting for England. I have every year since 2006, I think, was the first year I rooted for England. Sweden, I have Swedish blood. If Denmark were in, I'd be rooting for them. I have some Danish blood in me as well. But Sweden I'm rooting for. I'm rooting for Norway because of Martin Ødegaard. He's one of my favorite players. So those are the teams I'm really rooting for. I also root for Japan and South Korea a lot. Just because physically they aren't able to match up with a lot of the nations that are at the World Cup. But they play such a structured and sound game that it's just a joy to watch. And so I root for those two nations as well. I keep on almost saying clubs. It's not what it is. So those are the teams I'm rooting for. I know it's a lot of different teams. And then I root for Portugal as well because I've been a Cristiano Ronaldo fan since he first broke onto the scene at Manchester United. I've been a fan of his ever since then. Is he a good role model? Probably not. Is he the kind of player that you want your kid to play like? Probably not. But that doesn't mean he's not fun to watch. It's the same argument I have when I say that Allen Iverson is my favorite NBA player of all time. You don't build a winner around a player like Allen Iverson. You're not going to win a championship, but you're going to sell a lot of tickets and a lot of jerseys. And he's going to be on highlight reels forever, and he's a Hall of Famer. So it's that same kind of argument. All right, so that is Real Salt Lake and the World Cup. Good luck to Juan Manuel Sanabria. I hope he gets a lot of time on the pitch for Uruguay. And the U.S. looked really good in that first game. It's something that, okay, I'm going to talk about football a little bit here. I'm sorry, soccer, whatever. If the U.S. always played like they did against Paraguay, and what I mean by that is not playing scared, not playing defensively, using their athleticism to their advantage. Because the U.S. has always had athletic guys. They always have. DeMarcus Beasley, Josie Altidore, even Aguchi Onyewu back in the day could have won a lot of headers in the box. If they just played more aggressively and not scared, not defensively, not like how Bruce Arena coached or Coach Bradley or even Greg Berhalter, if they played more like they did under Jurgen Klinsmann and more like they are again under Maurizio Pochettino, they would be one of the best teams in the world because the skill is there. It's just they're always afraid. And I don't understand that. I will never understand playing afraid of any team. I don't care who it is. It could be Brazil. It could be England. It could be Spain, France. It doesn't matter. Attack them. Show them you're not afraid of them. Because that changes their mindset as well. Because going into the game against the U.S., Paraguay just assumed they could bully the U.S. and then force them into a defensive posture. And the U.S. didn't bite. They played their game. They dominated the left side of the pitch with Christian Pulisic and Anthony Robinson. They absolutely dominated that side of the pitch. When Christian Pulisic came off at halftime due to an injury scare, they flipped it to the other side, on the right side, with Freeman and Dest and Weah. They have the talent. They can do it. It's just they've always played scared. The coaching staff has always played in a defensive posture. And it's always made me frustrated. And now, something that I've been thinking for a very long time is coming to fruition. If the U.S. doesn't play scared, they can match up with a lot of nations very well. And it showed out against Paraguay. We'll see if they can continue it against Australia and then against Turkey. But against Paraguay, that was almost a perfect showing. It really was. All right, so that's enough soccer talk. I know a lot of you aren't soccer fans, but I am. I played it when I was younger. I wish I would have stuck with it. Anyway, so let's move this on to the college football future power rankings that ESPN did. Both BYU and Utah show up on this because it was just for the Power Four. And this article was written by Adam Rittenberg. So he is an actual journalist. He's not a talking head. He's not a guy that's going to be on the Pat McAfee show making a fool of himself. So let's talk about Utah first, and then we'll talk about BYU. Utah is ranked 25th. In the last one they did, which I believe was last season, before the season, around the same time as now, they were 30th. So even with Kyle Whittingham moving on, even with the offensive line coach and the offensive coordinator moving with him, and a lot of the players, Smith Snowden, John Henry Daly, they still have a very rosy outlook for the Utes. So the Big 12 has a lot of, obviously it has every team in there because it's the Power 4. They only have 3 teams in the top 25, according to ESPN. Utah is one of them. And it starts and ends with Devin Dampier, much like last season did as well. Now, I wouldn't say it's all on Devin Dampier because they also have Wayshawn Parker. So if Devin Dampier gets hobbled like he did last year, they can lean on Wayshawn Parker. He proved he can carry the load. And then you also have Bird Ficklin, who came a long way. Now, he needs to show more in the passing department, but he is a fabulous running quarterback. So we'll see what happens as far as what offensive coordinator Kevin McGivern is going to do with these guys. But Utah is 25th out of 64, I believe. Maybe 68? What is it? 68 Power 4 schools. So kudos to the Utes there. I will be honest, I thought they would be in the 30s, maybe low 40s. But seeing them that high is really good. What happens after Devin Dampier and Wayshawn Parker move on is anybody's guess. But this season should be another one where it's BYU and Utah fighting for that other place in the championship game. And Texas Tech, everything that's going on there, I'm not going to put my 2 cents in on that because I don't do off-the-field stuff. I don't touch it. So that's not me. That's not my realm. But it is Texas Tech's conference to lose outside of the quarterback position. And even in the quarterback position, the Utes saw the backup that is going to be starting if the mess gets sorted out the way that the rest of the country wants it to get sorted out. The Utes saw that kid, and that kid kind of torched him. So it's not like the quarterback position is going to be terrible for Texas Tech. It just won't have the star power that it does with Brendan Sorsby. So BYU and Utah will be playing for the right to represent the Big 12 in the championship game and the rest of America against Texas Tech in that game. Where did BYU land? This one surprised me as well. BYU landed at 15th, ahead of Michigan, ahead of Penn State, ahead of Tennessee, SMU, Utah, Florida, and Iowa. Teams that I probably would have put ahead of them, and even Clemson. So BYU ends at 15, and they could go even higher. Now, next season because of Bear Bachmeier. Bear Bachmeier, I am struggling with Bear because he showed us everything that you wanted to see from him last year, and he was only with the team like late spring into the season. So he didn't even get a full offseason with the team. He didn't get to do the full practice, the full everything. He has now. He completed almost 65% of his passes last year. He ran for 11 touchdowns, Bear against Utah. He threw for over 3,000 yards. Like one of the best performances by a true freshman quarterback in like college football history, in all honesty. The offensive line is taking a huge hit this year, much like Utah. But they do have some guys coming back. They've got Bruce Mitchell at center. Andrew Gentry is at tackle. They might slide him over to the left side with Isaiah Jada in the NFL. They got transfers from Washington and Stanford to help fill in on the offensive line. It'll be interesting to see what happens there because they did retain their offensive line coach as well. That's a big deal. The offensive staff remains unchanged for the most part. It's the defensive side of the ball where things can get really dicey for the Cougars. And that's because I'm not the biggest fan of that defensive coordinator hire. I'm not. I hope to get proven wrong by Coach Papinga. I really do. But there was better options out there. There were. And ones that would have landed better in the recruiting sphere. Now, Coach Papinga is a very good recruiter. Don't get me wrong. It's just there's other guys that had more cachet in different areas of the country that I think would have helped BYU out more than promoting from within. But different show. That's a different topic for another day. So the defensive outlook on the defensive line, ESPN is higher on it than I am. Keanu Tanavasa can be a game wrecker, but he can also be a dunce and make a stupid play for a 15-yard penalty that keeps the opposing drive alive. Utah saw it when he played for them. BYU saw it last year. Anisi Purcell and Bodie Schoonover, I don't see much in the way of rushing the passer with those guys. And then there's also Justin Kirkland, who is coming off of an injury. There's no juice there for me when it comes to the defensive line. The linebacking room is getting slept on nationally. This is the unit that I think is going to be huge for BYU, with Cade Uluave coming in, filling the Jack Kelly role. And I think Cade Uluave is a more athletically gifted Jack Kelly. He's a guy that's going to be all over the field, making plays every snap. And then you got Isaiah Glasker, who will be freed up to do Isaiah Glasker things because Jack Kelly won't be injured and Isaiah Glasker won't be asked to do what he was last year, which is fill in more in the running game and not being able to just be unleashed to go after the quarterback. With Cade Uluave there, I definitely think that's going to be a huge get. So that's the linebacking core. The secondary is going to be just fine. Everybody from last year's back except for Tanner Wall and a couple of other guys. Mo Bamba is another one. So the secondary is going to be just fine. Kalani Sitake stuck around after being courted very heavily by Penn State. That's a huge win. And then you also have guys coming in. You got Ryder Lyons coming in. You got his older brother, Brock, coming in. Is it Brock? Wait a minute. I might have read that wrong. Walker Lyons, the tight end. You also have Roger Saliapaga coming from Oregon to play tight end. So the tight end room isn't going to drop off like I was afraid it would when Carson Ryan graduated. So the only thing that can derail this season, aside from the obvious, which is injuries for BYU, is a sophomore slump from Bear. And that is one thing that I'm going to be keeping in the back of my mind as we get into this season. Because BYU can't really ease in. Sure, they have a cupcake game against Utah Tech, but then they've got games like against Notre Dame and Arizona in the beginning of the season. Arizona is being picked as a dark horse in the conference because of Noah Fafita at quarterback. So it'll be an interesting run. So this isn't my preview yet. As you all know, I do a show dedicated to each school before the season starts. That will still happen. But this was a very interesting look into how ESPN views the futures of BYU and Utah. And with 7 blue chip prospects coming into BYU in that recruiting class this past season, if they can be retained, BYU is going to be stocked to be good for a long time. So we'll definitely something to keep an eye on is that defensive coordinator and the defensive staff after Jay Hill left, and a potential sophomore slump from Bear Bachmeier. All right, so that is the college football future power rankings that ESPN did. It was Adam Rittenberg, who's an actual journalist, not a talking head. So it was a good article. Now let's talk about the Jazz, NBA draft and trades, and are they really going to pick this player? Are they going to go with that player? Are they going to trade up? Are they going to trade down? Is it actually going to be Cam Boozer? Is it Darren Peterson? Maybe it's AJ Dybantsa, and the Wizards are going to take Darren Peterson number 1. Listen, AJ Dybantsa is the best player in this draft class. He has the highest floor and the highest ceiling. It would be malpractice for the Wizards to not pick him. ESPN has a trade coming in where the Jazz will get AJ Dybantsa, but they have to give up too much. So what the trade would be is the Jazz get Dybantsa and a couple of players from Washington, and Washington gets the number 2 overall pick, Ace Bailey, and a 2029 first-round pick that is the most favorable of the Utah, Cleveland, Minnesota picks if they land in outside of the top 5. That trade's not going to happen. That's not a Danny Ainge trade. That's not a Justin Zanuck trade. I understand how desperately a lot of well, BYU fans, but also Jazz fans want AJ Dybantsa. I get it. I watched him for an entire year too. He's exciting. He is a lot like Kevin Durant. However, you don't mortgage your future on a deal like this. So there are 3 players, I think there's 4, that would be a number 1 overall pick in any draft of the last, 4 years, I want to say, if they were all the same age and came out at different times. That is AJ Dybantsa, Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, and Caleb Wilson. I honestly think if those guys spread out when they declared for the draft, they'd be number 1 over the next few years. So that is how the Utah Jazz front office kind of sees this draft bunch as well. I do not see a trade like this happening. Now, it's not terribly too much for the Jazz to give up. It isn't. And if you look at the 2 players that ESPN says the Jazz will get back, which is Bub Carrington and Cam Whitmore, both of those guys were first-round draft picks themselves. They both averaged around 10 points a game last year, so they would be bench players, which would clear the runway for AJ Dybantsa to start for the Jazz. I understand where ESPN is coming from, but it's not a Danny Ainge trade. It just isn't. There's also a lot of talk about how maybe the Jazz will drop back in the draft if they can guarantee that Cam Boozer is going to be there. That other teams value like Darren Peterson more than they do. It's a Markelle Fultz situation. It's not. Darren Peterson and Markelle Fultz are apples and oranges. Because Darren Peterson, when he played, looked like the best player in this draft class. It's just the mystery and the air of what was actually going on with him missing so much time. That is the only thing that's keeping him from being the top pick. So, what I look at when I see all of this is that there's a lot of smoke screens going on. It's that time of year. Nobody actually knows what's going to happen except for the Washington Wizards front office and the Utah Jazz's front office. I will be surprised if a trade happens between the number 1 and number 2 picks. I will be. Maybe they make the picks and there's a trade of players. I don't know. But it's not something that I think is going to happen. So that's really what I see with all of this smoke and mirrors and, hey, this team knows more than the other one and they're going to get hoodwinked and all this other stuff. No, Bobby Marks isn't in the Washington Wizards front office, and so he's not going to get hoodwinked by Danny Ainge. So there you go. All right, let's move on to the Utah Mammoth and talk about a lot of the players that they've been linked to, what's real, what's fake, and what to expect now that the season's about to come to an end this week. So, Utah has been linked to a variety of players out on the open market. First and foremost was Auston Matthews. Now, at the draft combine that was just held this past week in Buffalo, there was still a lot of chatter that Matthews could come available even after the draft and after the coach hire. It could be true, it could not. You don't want to bank your offseason and your next season on him maybe coming available and then maybe naming your team as one of his preferred destinations because he has a full no movement clause. And for people who may be new to hockey or maybe don't understand that, it is exactly what you think it is. If a trade materializes between Toronto and let's say Vancouver, and Auston Matthews is in that trade package, Auston Matthews is just going to say no. I'm not going to Vancouver. No. So that is what it is. So is it possible that he could still become available? Absolutely 100%. But is it probable? No. Pierre LeBrun is a voice that I trust. He is the voice I trusted when Utah got their hockey club. He was the voice that first reported on it. And it was the one that when I saw that, I was like, yeah, it's happening. So I trust Pierre LeBrun. I know a lot of hockey fans have issues with him. Yeah, he's not going to get it right 100% of the time, but he's right way more often than he's wrong. And his sources are solid. So when he says that Auston Matthews is more than likely going to suit up for the Maple Leafs this next season, I'm going to take Pierre LeBrun's word for it and not Hockey Guy 4793 on Reddit. That's just, the way it is. Other names that Utah has been linked with that I don't think they're going to go for, Darnell Nurse is a defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers who has had a very solid career. He's been in the playoffs. He's been to the Stanley Cup Finals with the Oilers. He's not the kind of guy that I think Bill Armstrong is going to bring into the fold. And people have said, well, he could be a good matchup for one of the young defensemen coming up, whether it be Lamoureux or Simishev. No, he's not the kind of guy you would want mentoring those guys. It's just how it is. Another one is Jacob Markstrom. He's a goalie for the Devils. He had a horrid season this past year. And after what we saw from Vitek Vanacek this year, I don't think... let me put it this way. I think Bill Armstrong is a little bit more risk-averse for the goalie position than he would be for any other position on the ice. Just because Karel Vejmelka, we saw it in those last couple of games against Vegas. He was tired. He really was. He let in goals that he just wouldn't if he was more well-rested. So the backup goalie, apart from upgrading the center position for the Mammoth, is priority one. It really is. So that's another one that I don't think is going to happen. One more is Islanders center Matt Barzal. He's just not a fit. Systematically, culturally, he's just not a fit. And he's not that big of an upgrade over the centerman that Utah already has. And so he's been linked to the Mammoth as well. That's one that's not going to happen. Now, for the ones that have a really good chance of happening, Dylan Larkin. Dylan Larkin has reportedly increased his list of preferred destinations. Nobody knows who those teams are, but it is more than just the Panthers, Golden Knights, and Wild on his list now. Maybe Utah's there. If Utah is there, they can send back the best package that Steve Yzerman can get. So that is a very good one. Another name on that list is another Red Wing. It's Sebastian Cossa, one of the young goaltenders that the Red Wings have. He was a first-round pick of Steve Yzerman, who just hasn't been able to break into the NHL. And the funny thing is when he was coming out in 2021, he was compared to John Gibson. Well, guess who's the starting goalie for Detroit now? It's John Gibson. So Utah would be pretty smart to jump into those trade talks with both feet and just be like, all right, what's it going to take? And if Minnesota does land Dylan Larkin, I hope they don't. But if they do, Utah can land a very good goalie on the back end of it, because any package that Minnesota would send back to Detroit for Dylan Larkin would have to include Jesper Wallstedt, the young goalie for Minnesota. So Detroit would get that young goalie. Cossa becomes surplus to requirements, and Utah could probably get him on the cheap. So that's another one that I think could happen if the dominoes fall the right way. Robert Thomas, that's another one where there's a lot of smokescreen going on. I think he's on the way out just because he's probably sick of being in the rumor mill, and he's going to say, get me out of here. Here's my list of teams. Get me out of here. Utah would be very wise to go after Robert Thomas. He fits perfectly. The only one who fits better is Auston Matthews. So Robert Thomas of the Blues is one that is also real and concrete. And then any other players you might see out there that could be moved, might be moved, you got to remember three things. First, timeline. What is their age? Because Bill Armstrong is not going to accelerate the timeline, and he's not going to go outside of what he's built. Second, contract. Does it fit in the salary cap? Or will Armstrong have to move a guy like Sean Durzi with a big salary to match? And third is, what line does he fit on? Is it an actual upgrade, or is it just you chasing a name or chasing an addition just to say you're not sitting still? Because Bill Armstrong's not that kind of general manager. He's not going to make a move just to make a move. He's going to make a move to make the team better, but remain in the timeline. So those are the three things you got to remember whenever you see the Mammoth linked to a potential player in the trade market. So there you go. That's the episode this week. I thought it was going to be a quick one. Turns out I just like to ramble. So thank you all for being here, and I will see you all next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave.